All right, I'm going to get started now. Welcome to the ETEP online training series module number 3. And I'm going to dive right in. Same disclaimer as the past ones. And just a brief kind of review and reminder of what this training is all about. So it's for an developing an EPA-Tribal Environmental Plan. And the approach that I'm teaching through this course is really to help you develop a simplified and adaptable strategic planning and management system. So this isn't necessarily how the EPA's approach, well, the EPA is not actually instructing tribes on how to do this, so the goal of this course was kind of to fill that gap, but just to make this something that wasn't just meeting the EPA requirements, but making it functional for your tribal community. And just a reminder of the nomenclature too, the different ways that I'm going to be saying the same thing. Really we're focusing here, at least today, on the ETEP component number 1, which is the Tribal Environmental Program Priorities, which is the same thing as a TEP or Tribal Environmental Plan, or which you will commonly hear me refer to as an ETEP Strategic Work Plan. I want to go just quickly review what's been covered so far in modules 1 and 2. So module number 1, the primary focus was on the requirements, components, and processes for ETEPs pursuant to the GAP guidance and really kind of understanding what those are. And we had also gone through the process of scoping and information gathering, at least initiating that. In the last module, we spent a little more time identifying and selecting the priority program areas, which was part of the scoping process we did discuss in module number 1. Also, I went through the process of developing a baseline needs assessment, or really doing the information gathering and review process, and then beginning to start identifying and selecting goals and objectives, as well as the priority program areas. And I'd walk through some of the information gathering and review process. Okay, and then just to walk through where we're going from here. Today I'm going to get into module 3, more the detailed agenda in a moment. But today is going to focus on continuing that information gathering and review process to a certain extent. But the focus is going to be on really the process of preparing your ETEP strategic work plan and what all of that involves. And so you'll learn more about that. Module 4, I've actually switched it up a little bit. I was going to do the question and answer session in module 5, but I decided to do it the next module as well. So that'll be a 60-minute module. And I'm also, if in case there isn't 60 minutes worth of questions, I'm also going to spend time on not only continuing to do the information gathering review and kind of process of developing the ETEP strategic work plan, but focusing on common repeat and cycling objectives, which are important elements of your strategic work plan, and filling that out. And then module 5, we will focus on developing an overarching strategic plan. In module 6, the focus will be on preparing and finalizing the full ETEP. And module 7 will be about utilizing, reviewing, and updating your ETEP and strategic plan. And then in module 8 will be another 60-minute session. There'll be questions and answers, and also there may be some other topics as well. As we get closer, I'll be able to identify where some more time is needed to be spent on particular areas. All right, so here's the detailed agenda for module 3. So I am going to start again going through the orientation of just GoToWebinar to make sure everybody's aware of how to use the dashboard that they have to ask questions, view full screen, so on and so forth, and also just a rehash of the course logistics. I'm going to quickly review the ETEP Component 1 requirements. I'm going to broadly talk about all 4 requirements, but just as a brief reminder, I'm going to re-walk through, do a review of the steps 1 through 6 in developing an ETEP. Today, the bulk of the time is going to be spent on discussing how to prepare an ETEP strategic work plan, so developing the framework, the actual document, and then beginning to populate that document, entering the information into that document, which is really good. Today's module is really going to tie everything together. So I'm going to kind of step back and walk through the entire process of what you'll be kind of repeating again and again to flesh this ETEP out, or at least the ETEP strategic work plan. And I'm also going to do more walkthroughs of the ETEP development process, so focusing on both internal and external information. And I'm going to walk through gathering information from the GAP guidance and the Prosper Sustainably's ETEP catalog, which has a series of goals and objectives. And then I'm going to go through the assignments and next steps for this process in this course, and encourage you to do the post-webinar evaluation to give me some feedback on how it went today. All right, so I appreciate that you've been responding to the doodle polls and letting me know your availability. So please continue to do so, but also note that if you're unable to make any of the modules, each one will be recorded and will be available as an on-demand video. There are also resources available if you have not accessed them. So the videos are available on Vimeo, and I've provided instructions. Each time I submit the assignments instructions, I do provide instructions on how to access Vimeo along with the password so you can watch any prior videos. And then also I've provided a link to access the Google Drive where you can find all of the course resources. And so if you have any problems accessing any of those, please let me know. The resources on Google Drive are read-only, so you can't edit those, but you should be able to download those or copy and paste from those as needed. Also, I'm going to be continuing to send the reminders, the daily emails during work days, just to help remind you, keep you on course, and call out anything in particular. And so let's just do a brief orientation of the GoToWebinar. All right, so let me just pull that up and a few screenshots. Okay, so this is, what you're seeing. You have this panel that you can pull up right here. And then within this panel itself, you have the opportunity to view full screen. So you just click on, I believe, this camera right here, views it on full screen. You have the option to hide the control panel by hitting this orange button. And then if you need to reshow, just hit that orange button again. You can use your microphone and speakers on your computer, and you can actually select where so if you're having difficulty using the right speakers or right microphone, there's a drop down that gives you an option of which to use on your computer. If you're having any problems with the audio through your computer, you can actually call in, so you click on telephone, and then it will give you a dial-in number with an access pin. All right, so here's what it would look like if you had a full screen, although the panel might still be in your way. There's a chat box too, so you may have a box that pop up that says questions and chat. So if you have any questions, just enter those in the box, and a little question mark or a question icon will pop up on my screen, and I will address your questions or comments. And you can also raise your hands. If you raise your hand, I can unmute you if you want to ask me a question directly. I also may drop some handouts in here, so handouts section of this box will pop up, and you can download that from there. And this occasionally happens. If I experience any technical difficulties, if the module crashes, then I will have 5 minutes to rejoin, so likely it'll freeze you on the screen. So if for some reason you stop hearing me, please try to let me know in the chat box. But also you can also call me on my number or text me if for some reason you think that there are particular issues going on. But if for some reason it crashes, I will come back on, so I ask that you stay in the module for the 5 minutes. If I cannot rejoin within 5 minutes, then the module will close out. I'm hoping that will not happen, but I just want to let you know in case it does. All right, so as I mentioned, I want to just do a quick review of the ETEP required components. So our focus really here is on number one, which is, this is all from the 2013 GAP guidance. The 90%, 90 to 95% of the work you'll be doing on your ETEP is going to be focused on component number one. This identification of tribal environmental program priorities, including capacity building and program implementation goals. We will cover components number 2, 3, and 4 in later sessions, but really, I mean, it's good to know about these things. You will want to and need to incorporate these as well, and I will explain exactly what these are. I actually did explain what these were also in the module number 1. But we will get in more detail on how to incorporate these into your ETEP in later sessions. But we're still focusing on the red one right now, the red underlines component number 1. And here are the main elements that are required. We're going to go through these again in this module because we're going to focus on actually making sure that these are addressed in your work plan. And one thing I'm going to try to do is speak a little bit more slowly this module. I'm not doing a great job so far, but I just want to go slowly through it to make sure you fully understand and can walk through the process and it's clear to you. Because this is really the bulk of what you're doing. I'm going to kind of walk through the process of researching and drafting your ETEP, which is, that's probably at least 75% of the work in this process. All right, so let's briefly review the steps we've covered so far. So the first one was determining the initial scope of your ETEP/strategic plan. And this involves identifying who the team members are going to be involved in this process. What are the program areas that are going to be covered? So what programs are you doing within your particular department that you want to have covered within your ETEP, including non-environmental and non-EPA ones as well? There may be programs that you want covered that are not handled by your department but you believe should be part of the plan. So more information is included in that in modules number 1 and primarily, but also a little bit in number 2. And you also do want to, beyond selecting the program areas, I just mentioned this as well, selecting the core ETEP development team. So who is going to be involved in this? Which staff members? Is it just going to be the director, or are you going to involve some key program managers? And who are the other stakeholders as well? So likely you're going to have your executive committee or your business committee or whatever the elected tribal council is that is going to, at least at some point, need to provide some input in this. But also, you may have an environmental committee. There may be other departments, other committees. There may be outside stakeholders. There may be people from the community, business owners that have a particular interest in this that you may want to partner with in this process. So identifying those stakeholders and establishing that connection, getting their buy-in and input. So that was covered primarily in module number 1. The third step, the information gathering and review process, really it's kind of conducting an abbreviated baseline needs assessment. That was the focus of module number 2. We're going to rehash some of that process in today's module as well. But if you haven't already, make sure you're going back and gathering that information and those documents that you're going to need. So go back to module number 2 to identify what that process is. I did actually initiate or talk about the beginning steps of that process in module number 1 as well. But you're not going to be able to develop the ETEP without the information that you need to populate it. And then when you're going through this process of gathering and reviewing the information, here are your goals. I mean, when you're reviewing the information that you gathered, you're trying to identify existing priority program areas that you already are working under, that you are definitely going to incorporate under your ETEP. So your relevant departmental and interdepartmental programs and initiatives that should be included. Also, not just the existing, but needed ones as well. So any programs or initiatives that let's say you don't have a climate change program, but you want to incorporate one into this plan, or you want to start one next year, then you may want to, you will want to include that into your ETEP. You also want to identify existing long-term goals as well, existing and potential long-term goals. So in reviewing these documents, you'll be identifying what are the major issues and needs, and really those major issues and needs translate into goals. So your goal may be to address that major issue and need. So if a major issue and need is to address water pollution, then one of your major goals is going to be to probably decrease or eliminate water pollution. So your the main focus of this process is going to be on identifying existing objectives, which are sub-goals, and these are much more specific. So eliminating water pollution is not a very specific goal. It may not actually even be achievable, but it is a goal worth pursuing. But there are going to be a series of objectives you want to pursue that will help you achieve the goal of at least decreasing water pollution, which may focus on particular water pollutants like or sources of sources of water pollution like stormwater runoff. You may focus on bacterial pollution, you may focus on heavy metals, and there may be specific objectives like developing policies and procedures or developing policies and procedures for a stormwater pollution prevention plan. So, if you're administering SWIPs or stormwater pollution prevention plans for construction projects, doing that may be a specific objective. And you are using these goals to guide and focus your efforts, just so when you're reviewing these documents, you're scanning them and extracting the most important information. So if you're looking at a 100-page resource management plan, you can scan that in 10 to 15 minutes rather than spending hours reading through the whole thing, because you know what information you're going straight to. And so part of that process is then, you're identifying possible priority program areas. In the prior steps, you need to start selecting your priority program areas, because when you start to identify goals and objectives and select those, you're going to need to put those within a priority program area. So you're going to have goals and objectives that are under your water program, under your air program, under maybe a natural resources program, under an education outreach program. So these are all possible programs, not saying that you're going to have these or have all these, but they're very common. And then once you've established your priority program areas, you'll be identifying and selecting your long-term goals. So for each area, so eliminating water pollution, eliminating air pollution would fall under the respective program areas of water and air. And you'll see more examples of that coming up. And then also identifying and selecting your intermediate objectives and goals, or your objectives / milestones. So the GAP guidance refers to intermediate milestones. I refer to these as intermediate objectives because they're really sub goals, and that's going to be the specific things you're going to accomplish to achieve your goals. So one example was developing a stormwater pollution prevention plan template could be an objective. Also developing an air monitoring strategy. So developing an air monitoring QAP would be a specific objective under your air program, which would be pursuant to the goal of reducing or eliminating air pollution. Okay, so really today's focus is going to be on really preparing the framework in populating this ETEP strategic work plan. So, all right, so let me just get some documents prepared for this. Okay, so your ETEP strategic work plan needs to address the mandatory elements that were stated in your GAP guidance. And as I mentioned before, I didn't walk through these because I knew I was going to walk through them again. So the first one is the short description of the priority, which is how it's stated in the GAP guidance. And in red, I've added program area because that's really how I think it's going to be most useful for you. Is instead of like going through and discussing each priority, like illegal dumping may be a priority, and that's definitely an important priority. But I believe that addressing illegal dumping should be accomplished through objectives. Really, that falls under the umbrella of waste management. So you want to have a short description of each priority program area. So you would have a waste management program, and have a brief description of what that incorporates. And then you could address the issue of illegal dumping as an objective underneath that particular priority program area. And I'm going to provide examples of this in practice shortly, but I want to just walk through these first. You also need to include your long-term program area goals. And these are those major goals for each program area. So in the area of waste management, one of your goals may be to maximize source reduction and recycling, or maybe to minimize the amount of, or maximize the amount of waste diverted from the landfill. Like that's a high level overarching goal that's not very specific but is worth pursuing. So the next thing that you need to include in your ETEP strategic work plan are your intermediate milestones and objectives. So these are referred to in the GAP guidance as milestones. I refer to them as objectives. They're really kind of the same thing. It's what you're going to accomplish to achieve those goals within each priority program area. And then you need to have completion dates for each of the activities within the ETEP strategic work plan, and those activities are your objectives and milestones. So your objective is pursuing and accomplishing an objective are your activities, and I'll show you how to incorporate the completion dates. I actually don't think you should be very specific with those. I think you should focus on the year. You also need to identify the roles and responsibilities within the ETEP strategic work plan. You need to address your plans to manage federal environmental programs, and this is, if you go back to Module 1, and I discussed this a little further in Module 2, this is the tribe's plans to manage federal statutory programs, so things like treatment as a state, so maybe pursuing your Clean Water Act treatment as a state for developing water quality standards, or same thing with the air program for developing air quality standards, or this could be some form of delegation as well. You also need to include, according to the GAP guidance, needed assistance to accomplish goals and objectives. So I forgot the word accomplish, but the needed assistance, and so these are things like training, funding, technical assistance, so you want to incorporate that into your plan. And you also need to include your indicators of capacity, and this is the appendix number 1 of the GAP guidance, which has the list of the capacity indicators. But the objectives themselves actually are capacity indicators. Okay, so this is my recommended minimum elements. So this includes all of what's required by the GAP guidance, but with a spin on it that's going to make this as effective and useful for you as possible. So I believe that you should, it can be helpful to have, a plan, an ETEP strategic plan overview that describes the contents, maybe has some form of like a table of contents, just so somebody in a glance can see what the scope of it is. I'm going to show you 2 different forms of this plan. So there's going to be a spreadsheet form and a Word format. You don't necessarily need to include this in the Word format, and it's just because because of its layout. But we'll see more about that in a moment. You will want to include the description of the priority program areas, and that's very brief, and I'll show you those via table of how to describe each program area. The long-term program area goals is pretty straightforward. You just include those line by line per program area. And then your intermediate milestones and objectives is the meat of your plan. You'll have many, many of these included into your plan. And so, the completion date was what they required. I'm going to say completion year. So just really this allows you to organize your plan by year and just keep track of what you need to accomplish in any given year. You can add specific dates if you want, but those are going to have to be incorporated into your grant work plans anyway, so I don't feel like it's necessary. It makes your plan a little more usable and flexible. You're including capacity indicator numbers, so going to the GAP guidance, and if there is a corresponding or relatable capacity indicator number, you would indicate that per objective or / milestone. Indicating whose role it's going to be to accomplish each objective. So is it going to be the tribe's goal, or is it going to be the tribe is going to accomplish the objective? Is the EPA going to accomplish the objective, or are both the tribe and the EPA going to have to work together to accomplish each objective? And the majority of them are going to be the tribe's objectives, But in this plan, you have an opportunity to actually address component number 2 of the ETEP, which is the EPA's programs and priorities. And you'll see how this will be addressed in the plan a little later on. And then the plans to manage federal environmental programs, they're actually include this as a separate thing, but also I include these as milestones and objectives themselves. So if you have a plan to prepare your own water quality standards and obtain TAS for that, that's an objective. So that's an objective you want to incorporate in your plan. You want to have it listed for a specific year. If it's going to be a multi-year process, you want to have that indicated what stage of the process you're going to be or what's going to be the objective for each year of that process. And then your needed assistance, I recommend including those as objectives and milestones as well. If you need funding, if you need technical assistance, if you need to pursue training, those are all objectives. So you'd have an objective to pursue funding to develop your waste management program. You would have an objective to attend the EPA annual conference to obtain trainings in a wide variety of areas. If you want to pursue, let's say you have an energy program and you want to pursue obtaining Department of Energy technical assistance on doing an analysis of a solar feasibility analysis, then you'd incorporate that as an objective. So here are some more recommended kind of mandatory elements and then also some optional ones as well. So these are, I guess, not specifically required by the GAP guidance, but I think they're really required to make this plan functional. So I think that you should include the program area for each description, goal, and objective to allow you to properly organize this plan, and you'll see what this means in practice in a moment. And then within your ETEP strategic work plan, if you're using the Excel spreadsheet, there'll be additional columns that you want to include per objective, and I will explain more what this means in just a minute when I show you the actual template. And there are also some optional columns too that I'm going to show you more as we walk through the template together. But really the key here is, and I'm gonna reiterate this again, is just start with the minimum recommended elements. You want to have a plan that's manageable. So if you include too much of this in your plan, then it's going to be something where it's just going to seem overwhelming to even update and use. So you want to have the minimum of what's required. You don't need to have things like staff work year, staff responsibility, the specific due dates, so on and so forth in your plan. It can be helpful, and you have that information in probably your work plans, or you're developing that information as you're developing new work plans. So you could populate your ETEP with that, your ETEP strategic work plan with that as well. But if you find that adding all this additional information is too cumbersome and you're not using the plan, then I suggest going back to the recommended minimum. All right, so I want to show you the Excel spreadsheet version now. Let me do a brief time check and get a drink of water. And also let me know, I don't see any questions so far, but if you have any questions, feel free to enter them into the chat box, or if you want to ask me a question over audio, then just raise your hand and I can unmute you. Okay, so let me find this template. All right, so here's a blank template. I'm not going to walk through the blank template. I'm going to walk through an example template that's been filled out. But the main thing is, as I mentioned, going back to presentation, the required elements. The plan content and overview is the first thing I have on here. So this is this tab right here. We just kind of explain the plan. And here's the blank. Here's the meat of the plan itself, and it has a series of tables that have the different elements. So you have your description of priority program areas, your goals, your table of objectives, and then down below this you have your plans to manage EPA, your plan to manage EPA programs. Excuse me. So actually, I think this will be more. Excuse me, need a little more water. I think it'll be better to easier to go through this with a plan that's already been a sample plan that's been filled out. All right, so here's your table of contents, which I suggest including this just so if you are submitting this into the EPA and you're submitting them the full spreadsheet, they can get this explanation. It just reminds people who are reviewing it to what each section means as well and how it's linked to the GAP guidance. So this is, just an overall explanation of what the plan is. So the plan is meant to be a living, perpetual 4-year strategic plan, and that each component should be updated and revised at least annually, including adding an additional year of activities to the end of the period and archiving the year that's just passed. So that's just a reminder to make sure that this is a living plan, to make sure that it is always a plan that's covering the next 4 years, and so that's being updated and utilized on an ongoing basis. And if you do so, I believe that this will make your job a lot easier. It'll make your office function that much more efficiently and effectively. So here's just an example of like a table of contents of which priority program areas are covered. So in this example, I have air resources, climate change, education outreach. That's a general category that includes administrative, financial, and miscellaneous goals and objectives. There's natural resources, waste management, and then water resources. So this would be a fairly standard plan. You may not have this many programs, or you may have more programs than this, but these are kind of, I would say, the most common areas you're going to find in a tribal environmental plan. Also in the parentheses, you'll see the shorthand version, which is what I do. There's the full name and there's a shorthand version for each one. And then there's a description below that. There's a description of each of the components or elements. Actually, I would say elements is a better name, so let's change that actually to elements of the plan. So the short description of priorities, I already discussed what that is. This is, the long-term goals, the intermediate milestones, like what those are. Plans to manage authorized environmental programs, I'd already described that. The assistance needed and how it's incorporated, so I mentioned that I include those as objectives rather than calling those out specifically. And then some additional information. So one thing I wanted to include in here in working with some tribes and just making sure that everybody's aware of this, like this spreadsheet, the ETEP strategic work plan, is not the full ETEP. There still are components 2 through 4 that need to be addressed as well. Some of those are addressed to a certain extent in this plan, but you'll need to have additional attachments such as your inventory of regulated entities. You also need to incorporate EPA's goals and objectives or their priorities, and we're going to get to those in future modules. But just so everybody's aware that this is not the full plan. Okay, so here's the meat of the plan itself. So, including the tribe's name and just, what this plan is. This first table in orange is the description of the priority program area. So it's going back to this right here. The first element we're going to cover, the description of each priority program area. And so for each of the ones I showed you in that plan, this just example plan, you may have more or less a very brief description of each priority program area. So for air, the air resources program focuses on controlling and minimizing indoor and outdoor air pollution. So for this fictional plan, for this fictional tribe, they have an air resources program that does manage indoor and outdoor air pollution. If you have an air program, it may only focus on outdoor air pollution, but you may want to expand it in future years to cover indoor air quality as well. So in the description, you do want the description to be broad and to cover what is going to be included in the future, so possible future objectives as well. So if you are contemplating an indoor program, or indoor or objectives focusing on indoor air quality, then you do want to include that in the description. And these descriptions I have in here, these are very general, and they really can be applied to many different tribes. So you could even cut, if this language works for you, you can cut and paste this language. And I have actually a catalog I'm going to show you a little bit later in today's webinar that has lists of these things as well. But you can go, this example is going to be available as well. So you can copy and paste these, or just, you can tweak them to meet your needs as well. But these aren't the only ones as well. You could describe them differently. You can include different areas, but these are good examples to help you get started. So there is a description for each area. Some more general areas, so like the education outreach area focuses on internal and external awareness of environmental issues and opportunities, increasing efforts and involvement in addressing these issues and opportunities. I think that each tribal plan should have an education outreach area. I also think every plan needs to have a general area as well, which covers the administrative, at least the administrative and financial goals and objectives. So in this case, the general area focuses on developing and maintaining the financial, administrative, and personnel systems that are essential to a highly efficient tribal environmental department that can accomplish all of the tribe's environmental goals and objectives. So the importance of having this area is that you're giving due attention to the resources you need to address the media specific areas. So when I say media specific areas, I mean like water, air, waste. But you can't accomplish the goals under air without having the staffing and financial and administrative resources there as well. And these cut across all areas. So natural resources may be an area, it's not specifically covered under EPA grants, but you may have other grants or funding sources that the tribe may be funding these efforts to cover things like wildlife and habitat. And so I have waste and water as well. So the next table below that is the long-term program area goals. As you can see, let's go back to this and just show you, that's what we're focusing on next. And as you can see, they're organized by program area. So for your air, you have a series, you may have one or more program area goals. The plans that I've been working on don't typically just have one goal. They usually have anywhere from 2 to 5 or even 7, overarching long-term goals. In this case, air, controlling, reducing, and eliminating on and off reservation outdoor air quality, pollution, and associated environmental human health impacts is one of the goals. You may have a similar goal focusing on indoor air quality as well. You'll see more examples of this in the catalog and elsewhere. So climate change, I have 2 different goals, one focusing on this first one on adaptation, the second one on implementation. Education outreach, I have a couple different goals. So creating and maintaining behavioral change among community members that'll lead to improved human health and environmental conditions. Like these are the same things you're going to find in like your GAP guide, your GAP work plan as long-term or intermediate outcomes. But you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Just if these work for you, just copy and paste the ones that you see here, or just copy and paste them from your GAP work plan as well. Just make sure they do meet the definition of a long-term goal, that it's not an objective. So objectives are going to be way more specific than this. So goal of your general, I'm kind of focusing on a couple different more areas you may not have thought of, but a general goal, a goal for the general / administrative / financial area may be to establish and maintain policies, procedures, and systems that assure administrative and financial compliance with all applicable tribal, local, state, and federal requirements, including timely submission of reports. So that's a goal the EPA definitely wants you to have, is complying with with federal requirements and submitting progress and financial reports in a timely manner. Okay, so now let's go down to the objectives table. And so this is, there's going to be a lot more about this as well. So, in the objectives table, there's going to be the milestones and objectives, which is included here in column B. And these are organized by area. So if you scroll over to column E right here, you'll see that there's a variety of areas, and do this drop-down menu right here. You can see this might be a bit small for you, but you can see all the different areas that are covered from air to water with everything in between. This allows you to very quickly filter and focus on one area at a time. So one of the goals might be to conduct an indoor air quality assessment, prepare a report, and develop an indoor air quality management plan. That's a major objective. You can include that all as one objective. I think that makes sense to do so. Really, this isn't a very detailed task-oriented work plan. This is an objective annual work plan, so you want annual objectives. If this can't be accomplished in 1 year, then you may want to spread it out over 2 years and then break up this into multiple parts. So let's say that you're developing the indoor air quality management plan would be happen in 2017, where this year you just focus on doing your assessment and preparing the assessment report. Okay, so that's the second thing you're going to include there is the completion year for each milestone and objective. In this case, you may have some objectives that are conducted year in and year out. So line number 34 is conduct ongoing PM 2.5 and ozone outdoor ambient air quality monitoring, including biweekly quality control checks and equipment maintenance. So this is something that unless you're funding, let's say that you have Clean Air Act 103 funding to support this or 105 funding, unless that funding runs out or unless for some reason you don't secure it again, you're likely going to be doing this monitoring on an ongoing basis each year. So you'll see this same exact objective listed for 2017 as well, because you want to keep track of the fact that you're going to need to utilize staffing and funding resources to maintain this particular objective. This is an activity that takes a significant amount of time, so you want to account for it every year that you're doing it. With going back to line number 33 in your indoor air quality assessment, right here it just shows that's going to be accomplished within 2016. You may have a specific date, like maybe you're going to accomplish it by the end of the third quarter of 2016, fiscal year 2016, and you can include that elsewhere. I just don't think it's necessary in your ETEP strategic work plan to be that specific. You likely have this in your air quality grants work plan, your Clean Air Act 103 or 105 work plan, and that has a specific date, and you can go back to that and follow it, for more specific information. You can add it to this work plan as well, and I'll show you where in a moment. But you don't need to. You really just want to keep these things in sight on an annual basis. So there's data management, and then as you scroll through, you'll see that there's other areas that will be covered as well. Actually, we'll get to those more in a moment. So you have a completion year for each milestone objective, and you may have the same one repeated year in and year out. You also need to include your capacity indicators, and what I do is actually just indicate the capacity indicator number for each objective and milestone if applicable. So for your indoor air quality assessment, there actually is a corresponding capacity indicator number in the GAP guidance appendix number 1 for that, and that is C.3.9. So I don't know if I have that open right now, but I can find that and pull it up and just show it to you. So let's go to the materials and pull up GAP guidance, and let's just search C.3.9. And so Tribe has completed a report analyzing air quality and radiation hazards impacting the tribe and evaluated air pollution control issues. So this doesn't specify, actually, in this case, I think it should be C.3.10. Yeah, so actually C.3.10 is Tribe has completed indoor air quality assessment and report. So this would actually be C.3.10. And you're not funding. Let's say if you have a Clean Air Act 103 grants and you're not funding under a GAP, then that's fine. Like, it may not be completely necessary to put this capacity indicator. I'd say that who knows? Maybe that funding runs out. Maybe you need to fund like something like this under your GAP grant. And so what's nice is that you can see that according to this, it's an eligible activity. It doesn't mean you'll definitely get funding for it, but you can propose it and you know that it's GAP eligible. So you can come back to this later on, and then as you're completing your work plan, you can indicate that number as well. So let's go back here. And then your roles and responsibilities is going to be the next column after that. So this is column D. And this just indicates whose responsibility is. For the most part, these are just going to say tribe, but occasionally there'll be something that's done by the tribe and EPA. So in this case, in reviewing and updating the ETEP climate change priority program area goals and objectives, obtaining input from relevant departments, leaders, and other stakeholders. That's mainly going to be done by the tribe, and you shouldn't wait for the EPA to do this, but at some point you're going to be forwarding your updates along to the EPA and getting their feedback and input on that. So that's why I've included this being both the tribe and EPA role as well. And so that's, for the climate area, there would be the same activity for the air area as well. And these aren't actually, let's put these in. Those filtered. Anyway, you would actually have this objective for each program area. But I'll talk more about that a little later on. Okay, so let's come back here, and then you also need to address your plans to manage federal environmental programs, your TAS, or whatever else you're pursuing. So I do this in two ways. So one is that if there are any plans whatsoever, this table below the objectives table indicates whether there are any plans or not to manage EPA authorized programs or manage authorized EPA programs. So I don't actually specify what those plans are in this table. I just indicate whether there are any or not. So for air, it says see objectives and milestones, or see objectives. So that means that there's objectives within the plan to indicate that the tribe does have plans to manage authorized EPA programs. Climate change, I put not applicable. Climate change, education outreach, general natural resources, I put not applicable because there are no options to manage authorized environmental EPA programs. Perhaps climate change is debatable. If you were measuring greenhouse gas emissions pursuant to a statutory program, then maybe that would be applicable, but that would be covered under air as well. But there's definitely none under education outreach, natural resources, or general resources. Waste management, there are options. There are no TIS options here, but you can receive delegated authority from the EPA. So one example would be the delegated authority to do underground storage tank inspections. So if you are going to pursue that authority, you'd list that as an objective. And in this case, for water, it says see objectives / milestones. So there are specific objectives for pursuing that. So let me pull those up. Let's do this smallest to largest. Nope. All right, so let's find it here. I mean, you could just search for TAS. I mean, you can link it somehow, but right here, 2016, evaluate current TAS authorities under Clean Air Act, investigate and evaluate need and opportunities to expand Clean Air Act TAS authorities, and pursue additional authority as directed by Tribal Council. So that's a sample indication of the tribe's plans to manage an authorized EPA program. So let's go to water. So I'll just show you a little bit of the functionality of the plan. If I just want to look at water, I'll go here, I'll uncheck everything else, I'll just select water, and I'll see all my water objectives. This is an abbreviated plan. The only one I did 4 years worth of objectives for was climate change. For the rest of them, I just did 1 year. Just like this is just a sample. So normally you would have objectives for 2016 through 2019 in a 4-year plan. And then you would also have possible objectives as well. So in this case, here are the plans to manage an EPA statutory program. Apply for Clean Water Act TAS for developing water quality standards. So that's why, and down here indicated that there is an objective to pursue an authorized program. So let's go back and unfilter this. So the full plan again. And then your needed assistance, I just include these as objectives and milestones. So let's go back and see an example of that. climate change is a good one because I did do a full thing for it. So right here, line number 41, identify, pursue, and secure funding for 2017 ETEP Climate Change Priority Program objectives. And, workarounds, or at least a way to not have to name every specific objective or each specific funding source you're going after, will be to develop a separate combined annual funding plan. And but this is needed resources. You're just indicating an objective. So here's another one, line 42. Obtain staff training to build skills and capacities related to climate change program area objectives. Again, like instead of listing every specific training you're going to go to, if you have an extensive plan, you may not want to do so. If your plan is limited to just a few programs, it may not be a big deal to list every specific training you're going to pursue. But also, in some cases, you don't know what trainings you're going to pursue at the beginning of each year or in future years. So I like more of a general objective to do that just as a placeholder. And then to refer to a separate annual training plan. But the point is that this is an indication that the tribe needs training resources, and that's going to pursue those. So I already pointed out that you're going to include the program area for each description, goal, and objective, and that is just this column over here. So column A, B, C, D, E right here. So you can quickly organize these or filter out to go to specifically what, let's say you have a meeting with your air quality specialist. You don't want to see everything else when you're talking with them, and you may not want to see future years. So you go here and you just filter out everything else and just focus on air, and you're meeting with them, and you don't have to see anything else at the same time. Let's go back and unfilter that. So here's some recommended objectives columns as well. I recommend doing these just because it makes it easier for you to manage the worksheet. So these are only applicable to the Excel spreadsheet. These are not applicable to the Word document that I'm going to show you in a moment. So some additional columns are like column F to have a category. And, with the category, let's see, with your categories, you want to, it's just having like an objective category. So a type of objective. So you have your area for the objective, which is air. And let's say with this, you want to be consistent. You don't want to have too many. So I'll pull down this drop down and kind of read some out. So I have one called administering. So if you're doing administrative type activities, or kind of just oversight type of activities, then you may want to have an administering category. Collaborating might be something related to partnerships or collaborating with partners. Communicating, educating, so I actually have that covering education outreach activities. Funding, meaning pursuing funding. Implementing, monitoring, if there's monitoring activities like under your Clean Water Act or Clean Air Act program. Planning, if you're developing a plan or developing planning activities. Regulating, if you are doing some type of regulation, if you're developing an ordinance or developing an enforcement program. Reporting, covering both progress reporting and financial reporting. Studying, which can include assessments and other types of studies, feasibility studies, and training. So I don't have that many categories, and this just makes it so that I can focus on each area. So I may want to look at all of the training activities so let's do that. Let's go down here and let's just filter out for just training activities to see all the training activities that I'm going to be pursuing, and let's filter this out to just 2016. So we can show, like I said, this isn't a very robust plan, but this shows you all the training activities that the tribe has listed that's going to be pursuing in this this current year. So there's one related to climate change, and there's one, this is actually related to just developing your annual training plan. So in a normal plan, there would actually be a training objective, at least one training objective per area, because you should be pursuing some type of capacity building related training for each program area each year. But this allows you to quickly look at those. So let's unfilter, and actually, so you can there's ways to quickly do that. So you can click clear filter from year. There's other ways to clear all filters pretty quickly up in the filters box as well. But you'll get more familiar with Excel if you use this pretty quickly. So another recommended activity too is a repeat. So this is where you indicate whether an objective is repetitive. So a case may be, so in this case, I know the only one I've done, repeat would mean something that you repeat year in and year out. So let's go to the climate change. Like I said, I've done a full 4-year plan for climate change, and let's see if any of them. So right here, there's a repeat activity. And so developing, actually you wouldn't want to repeating for the first year, but developing, testing, evaluating, and delivering education, outreach, literature, materials, and activities on climate change issues and opportunities relating to annual objectives is an activity that you're going to have every single year, or you may have every single year. So if it's like if you have a 106 program, you're doing education outreach, you're definitely going to have education outreach objective for 2016, 17, 18, and 19. My suggestion here is that the first instance of an activity you do not show as repeat, and then for future years you do show repeat. So down here you'll see there's repeats of lots of activities here. And for just climate change, it goes from, actually there's lots of filter, but as you can see the plan's a little bit long for all 4 years. And if you're just talking with somebody about like new activities, or let's say you want to run this plan by the tribal council, then you want to filter those things out because you don't want them to see the same activities over and over again. So I'm going to filter out the yeses and just say the blanks. So it actually shortens my plan. So it's shorter, it's easier to read, and you could filter out just focusing on year 2016 if you want. But so that's a good column that makes this plan more usable. Another thing too is to include the source of the objective. So for future objectives, you may not actually have a source, but let's say, for your 2016 objectives, some of these things will be included in maybe your GAP work plan, your Clean Air Act or Clean Water Act work plans. So if you've extracted this from an existing work plan, it's good to list that objective. So you can put your fiscal year 15, 16 GAP work plan if that's where that came from, so that somebody looking at this knows where, if they want more information, more details. So in this case, let's say conducting a climate change vulnerability and risk assessment, let's say that this also came from that plan as well. They can go back to this and see what that means. Like that's a pretty involved objective right there. You may want to see what the tasks are, what other resources are involved, what type of staff and work years may be involved in that as well. So those are kind of my minimum recommended objectives. You don't, those last few I just mentioned, the category, the repeat, and the source of the objective, they're not critical, they'll just make using the work plan that much easier. Sorry, I feel kind of like Bernie Sanders with my throat being kind of a little bit off right now. Okay, so coming back to here. All right, here are your optional objectives and the optional columns in the objectives. And so let me just go through these really quickly, but just want to reemphasize that these, don't start with these, fill these out later on if it seems like you'll be able to manage them. But I include these, you can add your own columns too. You can add additional information. These are completely customizable. This information overlaps with what you'll need to fill out for your work plan. So your GAP work plan has a lot of these elements. So your outputs and deliverables, your intermediate long-term outcomes, your due dates, specific due dates, the staff responsibilities and work years. So those are things you're going to be completing anyway. So you may choose to incorporate those, but it's not critical. So here they are. So you may have the work plan component that's not really so if your source of the objective was the fiscal year 15-16 work plan, Maybe that came from component number 3. It just makes it a little easier to find, but not necessary. What's the status? Have you started it? Is it not started? Is it in progress? Has it been completed? What are the outputs and deliverables? So, for completed doing an indoor air quality assessment and preparing a report, then an assessment report is going to be a deliverable. Your intermediate outcomes. So what's going to be, what are the changes you're actually going to accomplish or may accomplish from this? So you'd hope from doing an indoor air quality assessment that maybe one of the intermediate outcomes, maybe reduction in indoor air quality pollution. And maybe that's a long-term outcome. You may want to include the urgency, the specific due dates, your primary staff responsibility. So AQS is your air quality specialist. And then you may want to include the work year. So even though the primary responsibility is your air quality specialist, maybe your director actually has some involvement in that particular activity. So work years by staff members. Here I listed all the fictional staff members for this fictional department. So it's got an environmental director, air quality specialist, water quality specialist, environmental technician, and then administrative assistant. You can include whether it's a GAP eligible activity or not, so you know whether to include it in your GAP work plans. I actually, when you develop your ETEP, I recommending sending this to your GAP project officer and making sure they indicate for every objective whether it's GAP eligible or not. They may be able to eliminate an entire area very quickly by saying something like, if you have, let's say your department also has a TIPO, does cultural resources stuff, they may say, well, none of this is GAP eligible, although there is some cultural resources related stuff in the GAP guidance, so that actually isn't entirely true. But let's say another area, natural resources, again, like majority of natural resources, if it's just focused on wildlife, then may not be, but things like habitat restoration may be GAP eligible. Habitat restoration activities, possible other funding resources. You may want to include beyond GAP as well. So if it's eligible for other grants like the Fish and Wildlife Service Tribal Wildlife Grant, if it's a natural resources objective, you could get estimated costs, amount of funding secured funding sources, notes, and then links and references. When I do these plans, I stop at those minimum required elements and just put these in here so people can fill them out if they want. I think they can be helpful, particularly helpful for developing work plans and filling these out when you're doing your work plans. But I'll go more into that in some later modules about actually utilizing your ETEP strategic work plan. But focus really in your initial plan should just be on the minimum elements that I've gone over so far. All right, so I've showed you the Excel spreadsheet version. Let me show you the Word version of that. I'll save that. I think I made one change. All right, so I have two documents that if they're not in there right now, I will include in, well, all these documents you'll find eventually in the resources, the Google Drive that I've made available to you. So if they're not in there already, they will be within the next 2 days. So here is well, let me show you just the blank template first. Here's the blank template for doing this in a Word version. And a lot of those optional elements you really can't include in here because it really would make this really, really messy. So this just has like the bare bones minimum of what would be required. I highly recommend and suggest the Excel spreadsheet because it's just so much more functional. I mean, being able to kind of sort and filter and arrange things very quickly. I think, I recommend that, but if you don't want to use Excel, you don't like Excel, you really, prefer a Word version, there is some simplicity to this that can be more helpful and more beneficial, but here's the Word version. So you have your, name of the tribe, what year is this covering, and then what I would do is have a separate Word document for each program area. So let's say you're going to have one of these documents for air, one of them for water, one of them for education outreach. So this document down to the bottom is just focusing on one area. You'd have a separate one. So right here, the name of the priority program area. In this case, and I don't know why it says number. It's not really a number, but or maybe you have a number. So let's say this is air. So this is your air resources program. And then you have a brief description. Same description as before, very brief, kind of one sentence that you saw in the spreadsheet. Same long-term goals. You just have a list of anywhere from, I mean, you could have one goal. You could have anywhere from, 1 to 6 or 7. I don't recommend having really more than 7. I mean, I think kind of an ideal range is 2 to 5. And then your series of objectives by year. So what are your 2016 objectives? The same ones. You have your objective. You have the role. Is it the tribe? Is it the EPA? Or is it both? And then you have your capacity indicator number. And do the same thing for 2017, 2018, 2019, and then possible too. So I didn't actually point this out in the spreadsheet, but as you identify possible objectives, things you want to pursue, but you're not sure whether and how they fit in the next 4 years, you include them as possible so you keep them on your radar and you can evaluate them every year. So if developing a climate change action plan is not something that you think you can fund any time in the next 4 years, then you can put it as a possible activity and keep it on your radar each year. When you're updating your plan, you'll see that and you'll decide whether it's an appropriate time to incorporate into the plan or not. And then the indication of whether there are any plans to manage EPA regulatory programs. This is something where you'll incorporate this both as, this will state that yes, there are some, or say like C objectives, and then you'll have specific objectives about pursuing TS or some delegation or something like that. And then, I mean, this really doesn't make any sense. Like, I'm just going to eliminate this. Like, your needed objectives, your needed assistance should just be included as objectives. So not really having that separately. So this is just a blank template. I've also included the instructions, one with instructions that tells you kind of how to use this. How do you, delete the instructions is one of the instructions. Good instruction. But like, what is each of these things? So, add a brief description of this area, add your long-term goals, add your intermediate objectives and your roles and your capacity indicators. So this one just has, more detailed instructions. And again, I think I'm just going to delete this. Maybe I'll leave it in there as just an option. I mean, you could state that you do have needed assistance. I think you're going to have needed assistance. You're going to need funding and training for every area anyway, so I just think it's kind of unnecessary to have a specific section calling that out. Okay, so that's the Word version of the same thing. All right, so we got a question. Sorry, I just missed that. Hi, Ramona. You've had your hand raised for 44 minutes. I'm sorry, I did not see that. Do you still have a question, Ramona? Ramona, I just unmuted you. Do you still have a question? Sorry about that, Ramona. If you have that at any time, just let me know. Raise your hand again, and or enter your question into the. Just type your question into the box. Oops. So let me just see. Okay, so I apologize that for Ramona. I apologize for that, Ramona. Yeah, please let me know your question either later on. You can email it to me later on, also as well. And I also, if I don't answer it during the session today, then I will be sure to answer it later. Okay, so after you develop, so I have these templates of an ETEP strategic work plan that you can use to customize for yourself to meet your needs. And then after you've customized it, then that you want to start inserting the information into your ETEP strategic work plan, focusing on your priority program areas, goals, and objectives, and those required and recommended elements going back to slide 17 and 18. All right, so I did actually focus on some of this last time of like extracting information from internal information sources and incorporating those into your plan. So I'd started an example walking through this process. And this is where, let's see, so we reviewed some documents. We had kept track of the documents we had reviewed in this right here. So we have our document tracking, and then we had, as we were doing that research, we were tracking our research findings in the research document. So let me pull that up. So this is something where we were copying and pasting relevant information we thought we may want to come back to. And then as objectives were pretty clear, we were actually incorporating those just directly into the plan. So going to this right here, we'd started copying and pasting some of the objectives. I think we had just done one. So, planning, organizing, coordinating the environmental fair each year. I would actually remove each year because you had that stated. So, you may restate these, but so you would extract those. This was actually from, let's see, this is the, let me pull this up. I believe this was Esleta's work plan. We are pulling some of this information from. And I'll do some more of this in the Q&A session next time, or the next 60-minute webinar that will allow Q&A as well. To the extent that there's time, I will do more of this. But this is where we're just going through the work plan and extracting objectives. So another example of an objective. Let's just scroll down to a different category. We did a lot of communication, a lot of education outreach. Would be to conducting background research on federal grants and non-federal grants. So I would actually do that by program area. One thing you may find too is as you're developing your plan and you go back to look at your gap work plan, I think it's more helpful it would be helpful to organize your gap work plan in a similar manner to which you organize your ETEP strategic work plan. So this process kind of allows you to go through and evaluate how you're organizing your work plans and how you want to organize your gap work plans and water work plans moving forward as well. So some of them I see organized similarly. Some of them I see they have many different media areas under one particular area, like they'll have air, water, waste, and other things as well. But here's a specific objective 2.4, developing a reservation-wide watershed management plan is a specific objective that you would want to include. So let's go back here and let's say, we're going to do that in 2016. Develop watershed-based management plan. So tribe, let's just say, I'm going to say this is under your water category because this is really in a water objective. Your category is going to be planning. That's not a repeat activity, and we're going to say this is from your fiscal year 15-16 gap work plan. So that's another example of an objective that you would enter into your plan. So because we have limited time left, I want to shift to some of the external. So this is the process. So you identify the source of information, you log it into your tracking sheet. We already have the fiscal year 15-16 gap work plan logged in here. You then review that information looking for priority program areas, goals, and objectives. So one program area we identified was, sorry, wrong one, was a water program area, and you would include water in here and have a brief description of that. Education outreach was another one that you would include, and you'd have goals and objectives for each one, at least one. I'm not going to fill those in right now. And then, recording those findings, both if it's a very clear goal or objective, then you can include it directly into your strategic work plan. If it's something that you're not sure about yet, but you want to have quick access to it, then you can kind of just copy and paste it into this kind of informal baseline needs assessment document. If you do a formal baseline needs assessment, that's a rigorous process, you would include it in there. And I talked more about formal baseline needs assessment in the last module. Okay, so I want to focus on external information gathering and review, and so you can also gather, review, and extract information from relevant external documents, including environmental grant funding announcements. So one thing that I've come across that can be helpful is your GAP work plan actually has a sample work plan for just a few areas, which can be helpful. So, this is a region 10 example in the GAP, I think in the GAP announcements, where it just has a couple different possible objectives. So you can review this as ones. These are coming from EPA guidance, and you can copy and paste these if they make sense for you into your ETEP strategic work plan. Another one that's particularly helpful is actually the Clean Water Act 106 sample work plans, and it has it for fundamental, intermediate, and advanced programs. And this has a series of objectives, so reporting, financial and progress reporting, hiring a staff member is an objective, doing a baseline water quality assessment would be an objective, developing a water quality monitoring program. Let's scroll down to this right here. Developing your water quality monitoring QAP. Right here, this component, implementing your water quality monitoring program. So doing your water quality monitoring would actually be an objective that you're going to have. It's going to be a repetitive activity because you're going to be doing it probably each year over the next 4 years. So you'll have it for 2016, 17, 18, and 19. So those are sources of information. The guidance documents as well. The GAP guidance was one of the things that's helpful. There's some water guidance out there too. You may want to, through your discussions with external stakeholders, agency representatives, your May 2013 GAP guidance. So I've talked about this several times. I've provided it as an assignment. This is a very good source of objectives. So you want to, as you're going through this, record the relevant capacity indicator number. So I've given this assignment before, and something that I still think is important for you to do is scan through the GAP guidance and identify what are possible program areas and objectives that you want to incorporate into your work plan, your ETEP strategic work plan. And so as you go through it, note or highlight it. If you know you want to include it, just copy and paste it into the plan itself. Although you do need to kind of rewrite it because it's written in a different way that then would be useful. So let's pull that up and I'll show you what I mean. All right, so here's the GAP guidance. Let's appendix number 1 that has the capacity indicators. Starting at the table of contents, you can begin to identify possible program areas. So B, this B2 administrative and B3 financial capacities. That already identifies. I mean, you're going to have an administrative and financial sections. My recommendation is you have a general section / administrative / financial that you would include these objectives underneath, and they include things like reporting and just generalized information. You'll see more examples of those. C is in air programs. There's going to be specific objectives in the air program, ambient and indoor air quality. This is a water quality program. Here's solid waste, hazardous waste, and underground storage tank program. You could have this all be one program. You could have separate programs for these, depending on, if you have a lot of objectives under each. If let's say you have like only one objective each year related to underground storage tanks, then I would recommend including this all as one. But if you have lots, if you have a rigorous underground storage tank inspection and enforcement and regulatory program, you may want to have a separate program area. This is for environmental emergency response or contaminated sites. Whether you want to have contaminated sites be included as a separate category or under waste, it's up to you. There's a chemical safety and pollution prevention category you may want to have as an area with a series of objectives. So let's just scroll down. 36. This is where the indicators start. So these things are indicators of capacity, and all you gotta do is rewrite them a different way to turn them into objectives. So B.2.7 is organizational filing / records retention systems and policies. So to restate this as an objective, let's go back here and actually let's just copy and paste this. So let's copy that. Let's go, nope. So actually, if you're beginning to review this, you'd want to indicate that, make notes. Oops. A 2013 gap guidance document, you want to make note that you are reviewing it. So this is just to show the location of this. Oops. So that's just to, keep track of the documents you reviewed, and then going over here, and actually I need to recopy and paste this. So that's an objective. So let's paste this in here. No, let's paste this like here. If you paste it in this box up here, it won't separate the, I guess it still did anyways. Oh, and maybe it didn't. Would have been fine. So, like I said, this isn't really stated as an objective, so develop organizational. All that did was just add the word develop in front of it, and now it turns into an actionable objective. Let's say we're going to do that. We don't have that in our current work plan right now. Let's put it for 2017, or so that would have to be included into our 2017. Well, actually, if you've already done your 2016-17 work plan, and you've already negotiated, then you maybe need to include that in 2018. And then let's say we have a general area, put that under right there, and let's just say this is ministering. So you added that objective right there. If you didn't know if you want to include or not, you just put possible. There might be lots of these things you want to include, and you include them as possible. So that's, more an administrative one. Even doing a baseline needs assessment, like a full baseline needs assessment is, we put B.5.1. Let's scroll to an error one. So, an example I already used was, we're still in B, we're going to on C. C.3. So in this case, Tribe has completed an indoor air quality assessment and report. Say you want to do this, and you already have this listed as or let's say you are negotiating a work plan right now, and you want to do this in fiscal year 2016-17. So this is kind of stated as if it's already been done. So I would just change this instead of complete an indoor air quality assessment report, as opposed to Tribe has completed. And so I'm going to put Tribe, I'm going to put air, I'm going to put studying. It's not a repetitive activity. Then up here, we have general, we would fill those in, and then we have air as well. And you can resort these in alphabetical order later on. So, you go through this, and, if you want in the first instance, you can just highlight these things, say, I think I want to do this for now. Let's just scan through it very quickly and highlight it. You could actually highlight these things as a director. You could highlight these things and then pass this off to administrative assistant and tell them to populate the plan with the things that you've highlighted. But I have an easier way to actually, because I've already done a bit of this work. So let me just see how much time. So I got a few more minutes left. And so another external source of possible goals and objectives is a ETEP strategic work plan catalog that I've developed. Actually, my intern Leanne Diaz has developed this on my behalf, so I really appreciate the work that she's put into it. But this actually has all of the gap capacity indicators. They're rewritten as actionable objectives. I've extracted information from past projects that I've done. I've extracted information from grant resources, or myself and Leanne have, and so it's a long catalog. So this is going to be available to you on the website. So let me pull this up, show you what this is. All right, so here's a catalog, an extensive catalog. Let me make this a little larger for you. Here's an extensive catalog of objectives for a lot of different areas. So let's go over here and just see. So here's the objectives, and there are, I think, about 1,750. So I have not gone through and edited these that much. I haven't really checked it too much. I'm gonna do a little bit of that. So just, realize that these are just examples. In some cases, they may not be very appropriate. You want to modify them yourself, but I feel like it'll help you kind of understand what's required. So if I listed or know the capacity indicator number, it's listed here as well. And there's the roles. Actually, I just put this column in here so you could copy and paste it more easily, because I include the same columns that you have in the ETEP strategic work plan. But here's all the different areas. So I have administrative, air, climate change. So there's some repetitiveness, cultural, education outreach, energy, environmental emergencies, general, integrative pest management, landscaping and ag, land use, marketing and PR, natural resources, public works, sustainability, TIPO, toxics, pollution prevention, waste, water quality. So you can't really see, they get a little further down. They need to be. So there's wildlife and habitat, there's water resources. There might be a few more below that, but you can't see fully because the screen's not large enough. So you can go through this, and there's no need to reinvent the wheel. Like so one thing that I've done here is I've mentioned to you. So if you go to sources of objectives, the gap guidance is one of the sources of objectives that I've. So let's see. Okay, so let's do that. Let's apply. So I've put every single gap guidance capacity indicator in here, restated as a positive, an affirmative objective. So, one objective would have been having a statement by your tribal financial department demonstrating that you have procurement requirements that meet federal requirements. So acquire statements actually wouldn't be a require. Yeah, acquire statements would be an affirmative objective. And here's the corresponding capacity indicator number and the area it's under the gap guidance. So you have roughly 1,750 objectives to pull from to populate your ETEP strategic work plan with. Same thing with goals. There's not as many goals, but a lot of these are similar, maybe rewritten in very slightly different ways, but overarching goals that you can use to populate your plan with. And then priority program area descriptions. So kind of very, there aren't that many. There's usually about one for each one, but sometimes they're very slightly rewritten. So Leanne didn't, if she saw any differences, she sometimes left both of them in there and allowed me to go back and make changes if necessary. But you can just copy and paste these things in there. So this is available for you in the Google Drive, and this should be an extremely valuable resource. Okay. All right, so the next steps, I'm going to, as I mentioned, Module 4 is going to be, I actually want to do Module 4 within the next week or so. So I want to do this in a shorter time frame. So either at the end of this week or the beginning of, or sometime next week. So I'm going to send out the doodle poll probably today, maybe tomorrow for that. Work on completing the assignments. So, watch any videos that you haven't watched. I mean, really these assignments are just to help you make progress on your project. If you don't have time right now, these videos and resources are going to continue to be accessible to you. But conducting your information gathering and review, so your internal and external sources of information, recording your findings into your research document and or your ETEP strategic work plan, And then the new ones that I've covered this time, preparing your ETEP strategic work plan framework documents, which you're going to need to record your findings into it anyways, and then beginning to populate it. So entering your priority program areas, goals, and objectives, and then include required and recommended elements. I'll send an email of the assignments and materials within the next day or so. So I appreciate it. Please take the time at the end to just complete the evaluation real quickly and let me know what went well and what didn't. And thank you very much.